Hello, I'm Ted Leverette, the original business buyer advocate. For more than 30 years, I've been helping people find and buy the right businesses the right way. I'm not a business broker. I don't sell businesses. You're going to hear me talking from the buy side, and I'm going to be talking to Calvin Hughes of Paladin Capital Advisors. He generally serves the other side of the table, the owners and sellers. We're going to discuss why sellers of small and mid-sized businesses create competition. Okay, so Cal, one of the things you wanted to do was talk to me to get maybe a different perspective, or at least my perspective, into the buy side. So I'm open. If you have any questions, hit me with them.
I'd love to hear kind of how you got into this and what motivates you.
Several decades ago, I bought the wrong business the wrong way. It was a complete disaster. It took a year to unwind it. And while I was working with a law firm and trying to get a rescission of that transaction, I decided it would be a good time to actually learn how to buy a business. Before that, I was a hotshot corporate consultant, finance kind of guy. And I focused on all those things that people like me focused on. And I completely missed some of the more important things. And in fact, I even coined an acronym for it called CELBS, C-E-L-B-S. What I did not do when I did my due diligence way back then, I did not thoroughly understand the relationships between the company and its customers, employees, landlord, bank, and suppliers. I pretty much focused on the numbers. Big mistake. Right about that time, when I figured out how to do deals, I started doing better deals. And I think it was something like 28 deals over the years, different kinds of transactions. So I only had one blow up, and it was the first one. I created I created my job title called Business Buyer Advocate, and I trademarked it because back then we were finding the deals through business brokers, because that's how we bought real estate. We thought you contact business brokers. What a big mistake that was. And I learned about it because one day I asked a broker, how come we see so many business changing hands, but when we called the brokers, they didn't represent the deal? And the broker said to me, that's because unlike real estate, most of the deals are done by owner. They never hit the market. There are people who work with these sellers to position the company, and they source their buyers. That changed my life. And from that day forward, I decided, you know what? I'm going to try to help people avoid making the same mistake I made.
So what kind of buyers hire you most typically?
Well, it's usually people, or maybe small and mid-sized businesses, who've been out trying to find a business to buy or merge with. Almost nobody calls me when they're getting started, because the kinds of people who are entrepreneurial enough to want to buy a business, they're somewhat of a do-it-yourselfer. I mean, like me back then. We thought we were masters of the universe. So they have to fail. So I tend to get the phone call or the LinkedIn private message when a buyer, be it a small company or an individual, is just not finding what they need. They're talking to a lot of sellers and brokers. They just can't find it. Or they do find them, and this happens, not a week goes by that I don't hear from a buyer, well, a searcher, who found a wonderful company, went through due diligence, spend $5,000-$10,000 for all the fees it takes to get ready to be at contract, and deal snapped out of the buyer's hand by another buyer. That's when I get hired. And the other kind of buyer that hires me, and this is the rare one, is the buyer who, or the searcher anyway, who says, you know what, I'm the kind of guy who likes to do my homework, or the kind of woman who likes to do my homework. Maybe I need to assemble an advisory team. I wish that happened more. Most of the deals, my clients are buying businesses with the price tag of $1 to $5 million. And if they're in the UK, make that pounds. One of the things that's important to me when you ask what kind of buyers hire me, here's who I don't work for. I don't work for buyers who want to steal a company. I don't work for buyers, like yesterday I was contacted by somebody who wants to do a 100% seller financing deal. I don't work for them, won't even take them on. I don't work for anybody who's graduated from the most recent get-rich-quick course or how to buy a business with no money. Those people are just trouble. And sellers, you're wise to avoid them. Let's see if I have anything else. No. Oh, well, yeah, one more thing. I don't work for buyers unless they can show me what you need to see up front. They got to show me the cash for the down payment and the working capital. They can't tell me about it. They got to show me, because I know sellers and brokers want to see it up front. So no money, no play. Those are my clients.
That's good to hear. I'd really like to know from your side how you help the buyers cope with the competition that I hope to create.
Okay, you're asking for secret sauce here. Maybe I'll tell you some now and tell you more later, maybe even in this interview. One of the ways we do it is we create seller competition. In other words, I tell my clients, and I tell all buyers, always have at least 2 businesses in motion. My typical buyer has 2 or 3 in motion. We don't care which one we buy, and we don't care which one we buy first. Whichever deal gets done first is the one we buy. If we want to do another deal, like a roll-up in the same industry, well, then we'll make an offer on deal number 2 down the road. We say, or I say, businesses are like buses. More will be buy soon. And the other thing that I tell buyers to keep in mind who are anxious to do a deal, hey, listen, buying a business is discretionary for the buyers. You don't have to do it. But owners, some of them have to sell, and they have to sell now. And that's one of the things we're looking for, because that's effectively competition. The owner is competing with him or herself. He needs his or her problem to get off their books and into our hands. And so we play on that. The other thing is we really work on the relationships. We can't always avoid buyer competition, but we can beat it. And the way we beat it is by being best. And later on, if you ask about it, I'll tell you how we try to position ourselves so we get chosen among the buyer competition. How's that for right now?
I think that's really good. And it ties in well to the other side of the coin on the sell side. And it goes with our preparation to try to make it easy for buyers to see the value, to understand the company, and to carefully disseminate that information at the right time. And certainly there are circumstances where sellers do have to sell, but thankfully, at least from my perspective, it's not the norm, because that puts you into a serious disadvantage in the process. And I like to call the buy and the sell, it's a voluntary sport. Ideally, nobody has to do it. You do it willingly. Nobody has to buy, nobody has to sell. And if you allow yourself that time to properly prepared to go through the process carefully, you'll discover what the best possible outcome is for your business at that time. I like to counsel sellers and say there's 3 things that have to be right. And if you can hit all 3, then you're going to get the best outcome possible in a well-run process. The owners have to be ready to sell. The business has to be ready to sell. And the economy has to be good and support that sale transaction. If any one of those 3 are out, you're somewhat disadvantaged.
So true.
So I think, I'd like to know, you've built a wonderful reputation, and I'd like to hear a little bit more about this hidden market and how you access that.
Well, that's my claim to fame. Now, in my mind, that's when my career changed. And this was decades ago when I discovered that most of the profitable and mature small and mid-sized businesses change hands without a business broker and without advertising to the public. That's the hidden market. These are the businesses that they are for sale. They're just not advertised. They have people like you who are trying to establish a field where there would be a deal, or they're companies where the owner is not for sale, not even thinking about it. But we show up with a qualified buyer, the buyer shows the money up front, and the buyer says something like, look, I understand you're not for sale, but I'm going to own a business in your industry. So we can meet now, or we can meet in 6 months. I'd like to meet now. Let's get acquainted. And maybe I should be an investor in your business, or maybe I should be an investor working partner. And what we find is if we can establish a relationship in the hidden market with the company not for sale and no representative other than maybe someone like you who's not on a commission basis, sometimes these owners will, during the process of interviewing us, say, you know what, I think I want out. Well, that's a wonderful deal for them and a wonderful deal for us. And it happens because we're first on scene. And we're almost never first on scene if we're answering business for sale advertisements on things like Biz Buy Sell. I mean, if we're seeing those, so's everybody else. And we just go into the pool of looky-loos.
So do you think buyers should avoid business brokers and M&A advisors? Are they in some manner put at a disadvantage by doing so?
Nope. People will listen to what I just said about the hidden market. They will write down, don't contact broker. And if that's where they stop listening, they're making a huge mistake. All my clients, anybody who's ever hired me, will tell you that I require all searchers to begin with brokers. So once we've established criteria and once we know what the targets are in the region, we contact every single business broker in the region. Because just because you see a broker advertising a hair salon or a big manufacturing company, it does not mean that they're not working for a distribution or some other kind of business that fits our criteria. So we always begin with brokers, and I call it the low-hanging fruit. If we make a phone call to a business broker and tell them the criteria and we brandish our money, we show we have the money, we have the credential to do the deal. First of all, most of the buyers the brokers are talking to are unqualified. So we're going to look real good. That means we get first shot at it. And a lot of brokers have, some people call them pocket listings, but maybe what they really are owners thinking about selling, and the broker's been fishing for a listing, but it's not time. We show up, we name the kind of business, the broker's on the phone or LinkedIn private messaging with an owner, and he says, I have a buyer here who could run your company, and you're going to meet him now, or you're going to meet him later. You want to meet him? So if we can do the deal through the broker, and if we can show ourselves to be best, remember, these brokers have no time for looky-loos. They're really done nowadays with coping with buyers who don't have a clue. So if we can show we will do a deal and we'll treat sellers fairly, they will open the door. Remember, they don't earn any money unless they make a sales commission. So they're not going to take advantage of their seller, but when they have a hot buyer in front of them, they make the connection. So the key is we can be first on scene, but another key is it's got to be the right kind of broker. Zero conflict of interest. I tell my clients, avoid brokers who claim they work both sides of transactions. And I know that's controversial. So if there's any kind of broker that we avoid, it's the ones with conflict of interest.
Yeah, well said. Speaking on behalf of Paladin, I'd certainly be pleased to see you come on the other side of a deal, because I would then expect everything to be well prepared and ready. And in that same coin, each side, of course, that readiness to show that you can do a deal, you can make it very, very efficient. And I think that speaks really well to just that whole sense of, again, readiness and preparedness, which saves time and money and disappointment. And anybody who's been in the deal space or transaction space for a long time knows that it can be very costly and exasperating. And so I would encourage, and I'd like to hear you speak on it, is the use of professional advisors. Does it pay for itself? Is it worthwhile? So a client on the sell side, I always say to them, I will certainly earn my money, and in many ways will end up working for free because of the wonderful results produced. And they can keep working on their business and keeping the value up and things on track. I'm sure you have a similar feeling about that when you represent your own clients on the buy side and how you add the value.
All my clients know, and I'm telling all you searchers listening, the time to assemble your advisory team is before you hit the playing field. And here's who you need. You need legal counsel, accounting and tax counsel, someone like me who's playing the transaction, not a specialist in legal or accounting or tax. Later, you may need to dip into some talent in the HR, human relations, human resources. And the other thing is industry expert. Even if you think you're expert in industry, it really plays well if you show up in an owner or broker's office telling them that you're conferring with one of the well-known industry experts who will help you at least with oversight and due diligence, and after you buy the business, be there for the transition. So who are we looking for? They need to be able to prove to us they facilitated deals that should occur and killed the deals that should not occur. And one of the questions we ask brokers, for example, is who do we need to know out here in this city who are the deal killers, the unnecessary deal killers, these posers, these accountants and lawyers who don't have a clue, but they'll take on any client. And we just quietly blackball them. So every buyer who works for me knows they need to have someone, lawyer and accountant particularly, who can prove they facilitate the size and kind of deal in the geographic region in which we're trying to do a deal. If we show up with that kind of team, sellers love us, brokers love us, everybody loves us.
So I would gather then from what you said is that most well-respected brokers would perceive you in a favorable light. Is that true?
Big time, because they live in a world where most of their transactions fall apart. And most of the time they fall apart because either the buyer or the seller's legal or accounting advisor, those are the two that tend to wreck the deals, don't know enough about deal making. Keep in mind, the seller's advisors, the seller's accountant and lawyer in particular, get fired the day of closing. They're done. They have zero incentive to help get a done deal. The buyer advisors, on the other hand, they can have a long relationship with buyers because they can now become counsel to the company, but not if they kill deals that should be done. So the key is they have to be proven deal makers.
So do you always feel that buyer competition is costly to the buyers, or do you feel there are circumstances where it can be a win-win situation?
Well, right now, during the pandemic, and I saw it in the Great Recession, we have a lot of disgruntled and unemployed people, including in executive ranks. And some of these people still have savings. And before they blow their life savings to live, they are hitting biz buy sell and the other venues that are advertising businesses for sale. So we have a lot of ill-advised and ill-equipped searchers. And for us, we love that kind of competition because the more a broker and an owner gets beaten down by search letters and scripts and all the other nonsense these people are doing, when we come through, we can say what we need to say in the fewest words and show the money and get ahead of them. So yeah, we like buyer competition as long as it's a dumb competition. We don't like it so much if they're as prepared as we are, because then we have to be best. And if you ask me about it, I'll tell you how we do it.
I'd love to sometime. Some buyers, and even on the private equity side, will avoid any form of this buyer competition, often called auctions. They'll say right at the get-go, don't want to participate in an auction. Do you feel that way as well?
Yeah, pretty much. Here's what I tell everybody. So even if you never hire me, unless you have a really good reason to get into an auction, don't. Why? Because if there are other businesses in that same sector, they may not be for sale right now, but they might be for sale later. And if you approach them properly, they might be for sale right now, or at least be willing to bring in an investor or working partner.
I would think that, very interesting, if a buyer is rather enthusiastic about buying, would you caution them if they're reaching the limits?
Yeah,
on what they can pay?
Yeah, we call it buyer fever. We want our searchers and buyers to get the fever. We want them to want this business so badly they'll do just about anything, except we don't want them to suspend their common sense. And that's where the advisory team comes in. The advisory team can say, you realize when we were researching that industry, we identified a couple of dozen businesses that fit your criteria. And true, most of them are not for sale, but we don't have to do a deal tomorrow morning. So why don't we, before we do this deal, make one more pass to those other businesses and see whether or not we can shake one out of the tree.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the things that the searchers can do to stand out in the seller's minds?
Well, they just have to show themselves as being best. And one of the things that I do for clients is I create what we call a searcher marketing plan. And that's everything from how they set their criteria, how they go to market with letters and phone calls and emails and LinkedIn and websites and pitch decks. It's the kinds of financial information we show. Pretty much it's everything that we know brokers and sellers and their advisors are going to want to see. And so we package that. And you talk about a seller having a SIM, an offering package. These are 10, 20, 30 pages. The marketing plan that I work on with searchers, the last one I did was 55 pages. It included everything that we know will come up while buyers are searching and trying to do deals. And part of that was there were about 30 or 40 questions that we know sellers and brokers are going to ask us because they've been doing it for decades. So my clients get that list of questions, and it's somewhat sector dependent. So we cook it for that sector and size of business. And sometimes even we have to cook it a little more. Like if I'm working in England, it's a little different than in the USA or Canada. The buyer now gets that question list from me. And we craft answers and we role play them using Zoom until we think we can win an Academy Award. Then the buyer hits the street. Because guess what? Most of the searchers out there are just making up the answers as they go along. And and brokers and sellers, they know that. They just figure this person just blowing smoke. So the way we look so good is, again, like you do on your side, preparation, preparation, preparation. That makes us best. It makes us first. Stay in touch. It's really that simple.
I think it leads to one very important topic I'd just like us to add on here. That right fit, that best fit. And again, price is important, but it's not everything. Not often, let's return to the beginning. One of the big things in deal making is closing the gap, right? Sellers want a lot, buyers want to pay as least as possible. That's a good. So how is the gap often closed? There's often contingent payments, perhaps seller financing. And that's where you go into who you're dealing with. What's their likelihood of succeeding? So if a seller is going to have some form of carried interest after closing, it may be promissory note, it may be contingent payments, and some of these tools that are used this way to close the gap are vitally important. Therefore, considering who is buying the business and their likelihood to go on to succeed and hopefully do better. Because often my understanding and experience has been buyers want to do better than the sellers have done. They want to take it to bigger, better things. So the assessment of making a decision, will the buyer succeed? Will the buyer fulfill any post-closing obligations, is an important aspect of the deal. I wonder if you might comment on that.
Yeah. A lot of people, and particularly brokers, until they get to know me, they think, oh my God, if somebody puts Ted Leverette, that business buyer advocate, on their team, this guy's a deal killer, or they're bottom feeders and they're going to just pound the seller. Anybody who knows me knows that it's highly unlikely any buyer I represent is going to be buying at the bottom of the reasonable range of price. We set, when we're doing our due diligence, in fact, when we're doing our criteria, we know what the reasonable range of selling prices are for the businesses in our sector. We know the high, the low, the in between. I tell my buyers, don't aim for the low. Do not do that, because chances are it won't be a sale. You'll waste time. Aim for the middle or even towards the top of the reasonable range of selling prices. And of course, buyers, we're talking privately, they say, Ted, did you say you're not a business broker? And I say, absolutely. Here's why. Most owners have been so busy running their business that they don't see all that opportunity. And we have a booklet I use. It's free on the internet. I think we call it something like 120 financial lifelines. It's got about 40 different cash flow tricks. When we're doing due diligence, we go into that booklet. You can use it, it's free. And we can click with a check mark how many things we can do in the first 30 days to manipulate it fairly, without cheating, manipulate a business's cash flow to make it more valuable and more profitable, so that by the 90th day, we have dramatically increased profit. We've done nothing else, nothing else. So I say to my buyers, if this business is if the seller says he wants $1 million and we think the top price any buyer would ever pay is 1.2 million, and if he's willing to do it for $1 million, and we have identified that within 90 days we can increase profit 20-25%, we just bought a business for $1 million that's now worth 1.2. Do it. By the way,
certainly,
we cover some of this stuff in my books.
I think I'm sure the books are wonderful, and it certainly speaks to good deal making. So it's
That's
wonderful
what
to
it's
learn
about.
about what you do.
Okay, Cal, I think the listeners are probably ready to do something else. Let me close with, if you're trying to search for a business, learn how the pros do it. I wrote a book, How to Prepare Yourself and Find the Right Business to Buy. And if you're already in due diligence or about to because you think you found that winner, get my other book, How to Buy the Right Business the Right Way. That book in particular, if I would have known what I know now, I wouldn't have blown myself up 30 years ago. So folks, you're going to save time, you're going to save money, you're going to make better deals. You just have to do what the savviest what searchers and buyers do. And you've got to listen to what Calvin Hughes said. Do what the savviest owners and sellers do. Hey, I'm available, so's Cal. We can help you deploy the tactics we talked about today. Go to my website, partneroncall.com. I'm Ted Leverette, the business buyer advocate with Partner on Call Network. Thanks for listening and be safe out there.